Field report, Southern Theater. Our goal was to find supplies and usable equipment with a secondary plan of saving any victims still held in the zones we came across. It's currently been 30 days, and from what signage I can see, we're still in Tennessee, but very close to the southern border. The reality is we didn't take a lot of things into account, so I have a report of information, but some things I'm going to try to remember that are necessary but outside of the mission parameters. We're currently 2/3 of the way through this lake, and we're already out of general supplies. We knew we'd be living off the land, but the problem is that the land is fallow in most areas. You can't trust most of the water. We tested and it's off the charts. Even after it's filtered, it's not good, and most of the filtration systems are unusable after 2 runs, and these things are supposed to be good for 25 to 50 at minimum. We've had to create our own filtration systems using available resources like sand, and those seem to work, but they're going to require constant upkeep. There's no doubt, though, because of all you smell out here, even in the countryside, is rot and feces. It's literally everywhere. It permeates your senses. Most of the men are sick, and they both don't know why, or even in some cases realize that they're sick. And it's unclear whether that's from the water or some sort of food or the air itself. And the wind seems to carry the sounds of what can only be described as suffering. The new sickness also means that the men don't trust the food guides that we brought with us, and they only want to raid food from stores for supplies, which that brings its own level of problems that we take on and risks. We're also reading higher levels than normal background for radiation, which is, I mean, that's a bridge that eventually I'm sure we're going to have to cross, but as from now, now there's pretty much nothing we can do about it right now. So directly discussing bases, our first stop was Fort Campbell, and I was surprised to see that it was actually holding up and is being fortified. From what I was told, they originally rejected civilians, but as the problems began to arise, they started letting in a lot of people and started giving them jobs, such as building barriers in return for food and shelters. They have already begun a farming routine and rescue operations in the local surrounding area. They have not been without problems and lost about 1/3 of the men assigned there. Still, these guys aren't in need of saving at the moment, so I want to recommend them using whatever they have to, such as generate power for their weekly radio sessions, so that they can keep in touch with us and become somewhat of a hub, which is good to have something so deep into this area. They were able to give us supplies, and they do not have much in the way of fuel, but they are trying to work on some alternatives with the available equipment that they have. So that's where that's landed. Nashville, on the other hand, did not fare as well. It looks like civilians overran the base, and it was effectively abandoned. Don't have a date on that, unfortunately. We scoured the place for supplies, but much of the base was in complete ruins. It looks like it was used as a shelter at some point, but no medical information was usable from the shelter resources. We did find PACE victims locked up in areas that were apparently being researched, but there was nothing there to even link them back, and we had no plans of letting them out, and obviously you can't ask them what happened to them. Arnold Air Force Base lost 90% of its manpower, and the rest of the military personnel weren't, as they said, they weren't even aware that they had a military left. They're simply using the place as a base of operations, where they're basically looting the surrounding areas, but they don't have fuel. They do have fuel in containers that they are using, not a lot, but at least some of it. No idea how good it is. These men basically at this point need what I would call a leadership role to take over where they've left off. This base has actually very little damage, and it is very well displaced from the general population, and I think it could be well fortified if we could get somebody down here to work on it. We gave them a choice to stay or to leave and head towards the new border. A few did say they planned to head towards it, but my biggest concern is the rest who are staying here are just going to go AWOL once we leave. So that was pretty much where that left off. Those are the only places that provided solid refuge. Any structure you stay in is good for around, I would say, 24 hours before you begin to draw a crowd, so to speak. And we have to be careful of the structures because most have mold, decay, dead bodies, and that's created its own problem. There's all sorts of things that are basically growing in these places that you have to basically clear them before you can even stay in them, because again, we're developing sicknesses that we're not aware where they're coming from, and they have to be, in my stead, I believe, environmental. As you can hear, it's even affected me. For what I've come to understand, most people that were affected by this stayed at home. It's possible they were afraid of shelters, and the civil defense shelters were filled with bodies. It appears that the research was going on there, but most of it is burnt or destroyed. For some people, they stayed until it appeared they ran out of supplies and went out. They decided to take the easy way out is the best way I would say it. Pretty much every place had some sort of note or information about what happened and information of where they were going, left for probably family members to read or just anyone to read. We left all the notes that we found, and I recommended for everybody to leave notes in locations where they were. If they were covered up, they could make them more prevalent. But the point is that these were given to family members that hopefully at some point we'll be able to reunite with them, and I don't want to have that stuff separated. Many people did go to malls. They went to grocery stores, libraries, that kind of thing, and began looting to survive, but most of these didn't fare very well. A couple were definitely overrun, as possible large groups of these infected broke through glass doors. They were not built to hold the force of large numbers. One diary had said that once the power went out, that the food in the grocery store had gone bad very quickly. They got sick, and they were basically attacked from within. So I would understand that as being infected from an individual living at the whatever that shelter was, and had basically killed everybody there. Many of these notes talk about things like appendicitis or wisdom teeth, what would be considered simple things not long ago, or now those infections become fatal. So people didn't have time to bury these individuals either before they attacked, and now they've infected more people, and in many of these cases, basically a minimal explosions that drove them from wherever their shelters were, and made it impossible for us to know where these people went. Government buildings also had very little in the way of supplies, and many are burned or destroyed, and it could have been possibly from angry civilians, but it definitely was, in some cases, attacks on buildings that were considered government, and they were not made to be shelters anyway. One odd thing that I would see, and I don't even know how to take it, was the prevalence of people carrying stolen IDs, credit cards, things of that nature. I'm not sure if these were stolen or if they were looted. One person that was deceased had 50 property deeds with them, and all of them with different names on them from different areas. So it's very confusing about what happened in that stead or how that was transpiring. So that's something I would like to have others keep an eye on when in their travels, to see if that's something that's happening. While traversing the wooded areas, we also ran into tent encampments. Some families had tried to camp out in the woods to escape. Most of these, either individuals or groups, they didn't fare well. Obviously, tents ruined, destroyed. Look, up here, things had fallen on them and hurt them. So yeah, there wasn't anything much left of them, and they'd just been left to rot. I have to be honest, I did expect more people to have survived at this point. It's very discerning that at this point that we really have not rescued a single person outside of people who basically taking care of themselves in the first place, but very little in the idea of someone was being told where to go to escape, or if they would like to join us in our journey, if you will. And if those that we had run into wouldn't qualify for the latter. So for the idea that most people could tell them where to go, it was not an available option. So we will get more into that in the future. But we did get communications from local shelters, potentially, I would say underground. They would give us instructions, tell us exactly what was going on, but they would not provide their locations. They would not require any kind of numbers or ways of getting in touch with them. They were very protective, and it was no shock why. They did say they were doing well, and many said they were successful. Only one was really short on supplies, but didn't seem to have much issues with that context either. They didn't say how many people they had with them. So to say, if it was a group or a family that needed supplies, they may have had shortages in manpower, that kind of thing. So it was something we couldn't really deduce. Now, I would think that they would have some sort of, especially with the ones that reported they had power, so I would expect to see above ground solar or farms, that those would probably be fairly easy to spot. But it's not something we like to dig into, because if they're doing okay, the point of having to save them was not on the cards. I would like to take a second here to resolve mission parameters that are going to be problematic, and that's the thing is fuel. For the fuel thing, all of it is bad. Nothing sitting in cans was any good. Nothing in a vehicle was any good. Nothing was sealed or stored correctly. Diesel fuel, which we thought would be better at least, was just as bad. Even on the Air Force Base, all the helicopter fuel was completely spoiled. The fuel that was kept underground in, say, gas stations, they'd require power to extract, and there was no way of testing it. And so if we did pull something up or managed to make enough power to waste on these stations, we'd be pulling up something that probably just was separated ethanol and bad gas. So that did not fare well. The next one is headshots. We were told when we encountered individuals, that the best way to dispatch them was to deal significant damage to the brain, or vertebral stem from the head to separate the head, basically. And still we were told to limit firearm usage due to our shortage of firearms and ammunition, and to rely basically on knives and machetes. And we never developed any sort of attack plan or training that would develop these sort of new forms of attack. And people are finding very much difficulty with knives, difficulty with machetes, dealing enough damage to actually inflict damage on the skull to be able to basically hit somebody and then deal with the next target. And that's something we're definitely going to be able to, we have to work on that in the future. The handguns were actually the worst, and even some of our most trained have had issues with them. Some will go back to their training and go for center of mass, which does nothing. Thankfully, some have gone towards damaging movable areas, so towards the midsection, to separate legs so that they fall and that nature. Those attacks seem to be a lot more effective. But trip maneuvers, that kind of thing, basically martial arts. People who've had any kind of martial arts training, especially like learning to impact and hit the center area here, is is integral, because their lack of ability to move or recover from any sort of thing, and they don't have the ability that we've seen to use any kind of weapons, or at least they don't have access to them, thankfully. So that's been something that we're going to have to deal with. We've had most of these guys, we just have them fall back to a long gun, AR, etc., to improve the accuracy, but that's still going to work at close range, and when they do, it draws a great deal of attention. So you go from being singular to being flanked, and that's the problem. Is the idea of staying away from being flanked is a priority. And there's also this big concern of stuff like mosquitoes, fleas, gnats, any kind of bugs, anything that pierces skin. We don't really understand exactly how that's transpired, that it could possibly be getting others sick, and there's a big fear about that right now. So this area, we need to research whether these things can spread the illness or not, and there's a lot of them out here, as well as other scavengers that feed on infected, and there's potential that they could bite or injure other people, snakes, spiders, anything like that, any animal out here that can possibly bite you. We don't know how this illness affects them, and yeah, we have no idea. So there's a potential there. The most important thing we need to address is going to be in the future those psychological factor, and it's going to be that way both for those in our group as well as the enlisted as well as the civilians. It's bad, and I'm just talking about our team here as an example. They've had to kill their own men to survive, sure, but most people out there are an absolute mess. Some completely disconnected from reality, even if we can call it that. To put it into content here, the concept of an undead child, or undead children, by the way, plural, has got to be the most horrifying thing you will ever witness. You don't understand it until you see it, and it's horrifying on another scale. Even trained soldiers do not know how to handle these things. These infected people that literally their clothes no longer fit, they've withered up, and they simply fall off. So now you have these naked individuals walking around, and then you find a shelter and realize that before they fell, they had already engaged in cannibalism. So you realize you can't trust anything or anybody out there, and men start asking, what are we even doing here? Who are they going to save, even if there are people to save? And you don't have an answer for it, which I don't have an answer for it at this point. But we're going to continue doing this mission as we had it, and we're going to keep the path that we've set here. And what I haven't said to anyone is the reality is that I think we're stirring them up. We have an army of its own in our wake that we stirred up, and we're going to have to go back through them at some point once we've completed this, and we have nothing to show for this, and I think that's frankly horrifying at this point. So with that note, I'm signing off. We're going to continue to head towards Florida. We'll be in contact at the regular time. Talk to you then.